and welcome to this lesson on the data science pipeline, data from cradle to grave. So data science is both science and art. And what's important to note is that a lot of it requires intuition. This includes when we start off with framing the problem, which means how we think about and what aspect we're looking at in terms of the world around us, as well as creating a mental model of that world in terms of what are the different pieces and how do they all fit together so that we can begin to create a strategy for organizing our data. So it all begins with intuition, and then you go through more of a scientific process to go and grab that data, but there's plenty of art in that design. The way we like to talk about the data science pipeline is with what we call the MOP-VAR or mop the variables approach. So just think mop the variables or MOP-VAR. First, it starts with a model. Now, a lot of different data science processes don't show data science starting with a model, but that's because of the fact that they're making an intuitive leap. They're initially starting with what comes next, which is organizing the data. But first, you have to have that intuition and framing. Second comes organizing. That means identifying your data sources, getting those data collected, and then cleaning them up so that they can be brought together, which is the third step of mopping the data. MOP-VAR is all about cleaning first, and then visualizing, analyzing, and routinizing. So process comes third. Process is all about transforming and deriving new variables. It also involves bringing your different data sets together, merging and linking. We're going to talk about how you can do that. Then you get into visualizing. And this is where you finally get a chance to see your data, and you can see if you have any natural breaks, any kind of certain distributions. You can then also visualize in terms of geospatial data where things are happening. And that's going to give you a lot of intuition about if you need to go back a step or two, or if you're ready to perform the next step, which is analyze. Analyze is where you have the whole process of describing and then correlating and then performing regression and then potentially developing finally a factored down model. And we're going to talk about that as well. And then the last step is routinizing. Routinizing is about taking that data and turning it into some kind of visual dashboard or product that you can use again and again. So mop the variables. Mop is all about cleaning up. Variables is all about doing analysis. MOP-VAR. Now, to get started, let's take a look at how visualizing the data science process really works. We're going to start off, and we have our reality, and we start off with a question about, well, if we had some product like a minivan, who wants it? Why do they need it? What predicts that they need it? What are the patterns, the correlation, and the process, the causation that will change this over time? And as we think about it, we'll identify, well, there are definitely some buyers, and those buyers have influencers and users who also use the minivan. And of course, there are competitors, and they're also going to have relationships with the influencers and users. And our minivan is going to be compared against them. And then, of course, this all happens in some location, and there's some kind of geospatial element that connects these things together. Oftentimes, spatial dependence is a very powerful driver for what locations know about and behave in different ways. So as we think about this, we've already created our mental model before we get started on our data science process, which once we've identified our model, we asked our questions, we can then begin the process of collecting raw data, processing that data so that now it is ready and integrated into a clean data set that we can visualize and explore, and then decide to go back if we need to, or hopefully we can move forward, do some modeling and analysis, come up with some kind of understanding that in terms of the relationships and the correlation between the different parts of the real world. And we can then produce a nice visual dashboard to keep us informed and to tell us if we're moving forward on our key performance indicators, as well as develop any data products that would then go and be deployed back into reality. And in this case, we're talking about things like that recommendation algorithm that we introduced this whole lesson with as an example. So when you think about the data science process, note that it all starts with the modeling and then you go into data collection. Now, finding data in your ecosystem is a lot easier than you might think. Oftentimes, we can find it in terms of economics data, where we may look at the Department of Commerce with their decennial census data or the American Community Survey. This is coming up soon for those in the United States. And in fact, this data is extremely valuable for understanding the demographics of the people involved. There's also the BLS occupational outlook data, which can help a lot in terms of your demographics and understanding people's buying behaviors, as well as IBIS World. IBIS World is fantastic. It's got tons of information about growth rates. It tells you about how much money is being spent in terms of marketing, and that gives you a sense of your barriers to entry. So hopefully you've learned a little bit about this already, but that's one great source. And then another is to take a look at other geospatial data sets that are out there, either in Esri's Open Data Hub or OpenStreetMap, and that will allow you to put together an information set like what you see here. And what this is actually a graph in terms of the year 2019 and the averages of unemployment by state. And it turns out that, as you might expect, New Mexico is actually one of the top #1 corporate income tax rate for people who want to start a new manufacturing business, and it has very high levels of unemployment. So if you wanted to go start a new business, that would be the place to go. That kind of data is very interesting when corporations are making their decisions about where do they want to build their next manufacturing plant. It should be no surprise that this is, of course, also the same locations where we see people building for new solar power generation systems, as well as other new manufacturing plants. So what about your company? Your company actually has a lot of great data available to it. And in fact, if you think about your company and all the different services and how they're connected, again, using that systems thinking, we immediately would look first to our business accounting, which usually is highly accurate, has a lot of comprehensive data, but it may not exactly map to your actual activities because of the fact that it's accounting. It may not be project allocated or product allocated. It may be allocated to different units. So you might have to do some parsing. Of course, if you're doing sales of any kind, you're likely to have a CRM within your company, almost guaranteed. And that holds enormous amounts of data that you can dive into and gather from, including both the marketing and the sales side of your customer relationship management system. Using this data can provide you with powerful insights into potential segments or areas where your customers are not being served and could potentially have more service, or that are looking for even greater levels of engagement. And then lastly, other functional systems. So we have a lot of systems in our companies. Those include operating systems such as your standard IT within the company itself. You're going to have logs that are going to come out of your systems that are in operations. You're going to have help tickets that are being generated whenever someone has an issue. You're going to look at the product backlogs. Hopefully they're being recorded. Specialized projects like any kind of customized offerings that have been developed for special customers, that may help you identify a great new opportunity to go pursue, or some kind of important feature you could add to your product, as well as the marketing department. They're going to probably have their own trove of data in terms of campaigns and surveys that they've run, and that can be a great place to go and get some really good information about your product in your market. So then once you've gone and you've looked at the different places where you can currently get data that's already been generated, you may want to go about actually capturing new data of your own for your market and for your product. And almost certainly you will. This is going to be how most of your data is generated when it comes to your analysis. We're going to break down the types of data you can create and capture into two big groups. You're going to have your market, where we talk about the customers and the value proposition you're offering them and the channels by which you reach them, as well as your product. What is the value that you're actually delivering in your product? What are the activities that are required to do it and the resources that it takes to build it? So we also take the kind of data that we generate and we think about it in two different groups. We have generative, which is data that we generate without having a hypothesis. We're kind of open to discovering new information and insights. And then there's evaluative, where We have a hypothesis and we want to see if it is correct or not. We're testing our solution. So to begin, in the market area, when we're generating new information, we're oftentimes asking the question, who is our customer? What do they look like? What kind of jobs do they have to get done? How do we reach them? And the kind of techniques that we use in order to get that type of information is we do a customer discovery interview. That's kind of step one in the customer development process. We also do what's called contextual inquiry. That's where you go and you actually observe people in their environment doing their job to figure out beyond what they say about it, what do they actually do? We can also data mine our own ecosystem and company. We just talked about that on the previous 2 slides. And then we also can run surveys and focus groups, but oftentimes the results there are limited. Now, as a color key here, I've taken all the qualitative information and I've put it in blue, and all of the quantitative information, I've put it in red. Qualitative is going to be information that gives you ideas and trends and clues you in, while quantitative is going to be something that's hard that you can actually dive into. And we talked about that in the previous week. So now, once you have a proposition that you want to test in your market, you may then want to ask questions like, are your customers willing to pay for it? Do you have a clear sense of what the cost to deliver it will be? Can we scale our marketing so that our channels are able to reach all of our customers at the speed and quantity that we need in order to build the business we want? And to test those kinds of solutions, the first thing we want to do is we want to see, okay, does the user understand what we're offering? That would be like a 5-second test where you show a user your product and very quickly ask them, do you know immediately what it's for and how to use it after 5 seconds of looking at it? Another is to use what's called conjoint analysis. This is where you essentially do pairwise comparison between A or B, and you find out how well things rack up against each other. It's the basis for doing analytical hierarchy processes as well. You can also do a smoke test, which is like a landing page or a fake door. And what that does is that basically puts out into the world the proposition that you have, say, a product, and you've created a landing page for it, and then you collect someone's information, or they even can prepay for it, and you haven't actually built that product yet, but you can get a good sense of where is the market in terms of being interested in this product based on your conversion rates. And then lastly, data mining the ecosystem in your company can also tell you about this. And oftentimes you can get creative, especially with your existing accounts, to answer this data. Now let's talk about products. Here we're going to be asking questions like, can we actually solve this problem we say we can solve? What features are needed to get it done? How do we prioritize our development so we're working on the most important thing first? And the type of tests that we're going to run are, first, we have the solution interview. This is kind of the alternative to the customer discovery interview, where we actually go and talk with the customer about what we are offering. And when we ask questions like, what would be the main hurdles for you to adopt this new technology? What would be any of the issues? Who would we have to influence to help you buy it? Another great technique is to do a demo pitch. Pitch your investors. Pitch your potential customers where they are in their marketplace. Do a little stand at a conference. Another is a concierge test or consulting. So this is essentially the most extreme version of the MVP, where you go and you actually perform the work before the product is able to perform the work. And that allows you to test the value of this and to see how much time and effort it takes. And then lastly, and probably most interestingly in this set of tests, is called Picnic in the Graveyard. And that is a really great technique where you go and look at what products have come before you and died. And so you go and you spend some time researching who has tried to solve your problem and where they potentially stumbled. And that can give you some really great insights into potential areas where a market did exist, but maybe there was some failure of execution. Or it can give you information in terms of understanding where products were on the road, but then they fell short. So lastly, once you have a product and you have identified the market and you've got a good sense of it, you're going to ask questions like, does our product actually do what we say it will do? Or you may want to answer other questions related to that, such as which version of our product or our product's marketing and funnel mechanisms are working best? How can we optimize this product? And so oftentimes we will use paper prototypes if you want to get some quick qualitative feedback, especially from people who haven't seen it before, or we'll run some kind of prototype build and analysis with a Wizard of Oz model, which is essentially a partially built product where there are operations on the background that are manual or manually helped along, as well as doing product analytics on A/B split tests or multivariate tests, as well as taking a look at your customer satisfaction and net promoter score if you just make the change in production and see how have things changed over time. Lots of different types of tests, but this is where you can generate your own data to get started on the process. Okay, so we just covered a lot of different ways that you can gather data. And just as a quick reminder, we started off by talking about this data science pipeline. And the data science pipeline always starts with modeling, with understanding your world around you and thinking about how the different pieces connect. Then we get into data gathering, and then we're going to go into the processing and cleaning and integration work, which we're going to talk about in 2 lessons from now. And after that, we can visualize, we can analyze, and then routinize our data so that once we have a good stream of information that we want to repeat, we can do so again automatically. Now, the different ways that we can gather data to feed this pipeline, well, you got your ecosystem, which is out there in terms of your Department of Commerce data and the BLM data, as well as the census data, as well as potential sources like geospatial mashups, where you can go gather information from Esri's Open Data Hub or OpenStreetMap, and then maybe find some connections that you didn't even know were there before. But beyond the simple ecosystem and free available data from your government, you can also look at data in open sources. You can also look at data that comes from within your company. So you've got the financials, you've got the marketing, you've got the sales group. They all have data systems that can help you, as well as your existing products. What are the help tickets? What are the issues? What are the backlogs? What tests have been run? And what kind of campaigns have started and what kind of information did they learn? After you get that kind of information, you can then begin to generate more data for yourself on your market and your product by running different tests like we just covered. So at this point, you're ready to get started. You understand the pipeline, you understand how to feed the pipeline. Now, before you get off and running, let's talk about prototypes and data types so that you can do a great job of capturing your data and making sure that the data that you do capture is usable and understood. We look forward to seeing you in that lesson.